Hello, it's the NFL Exporter Ty Goodman, and we're here to do a Week 10 review and wrap up of the 2013 NFL season. So without further ado, let's jump right in. In our first game we had on Thursday night, the Minnesota Vikings defeated the Washington Redskins 34-27. The win was the second for the Vikings, improving them to 2-7, while the loss dropped the Redskins to 3-6. In this game, we've seen the Redskins pretty much have control of this game, jumping out to a 27-14 lead before giving that up to Minnesota. The Redskins were doing an excellent job on the offense, converting third downs. Robert Griffith III, although under duress, was able to be effective in the passing game. And Alfred Morris did a great job with 25 carries for 139 yards. However, it wasn't enough. Minnesota was able to mount a comeback. Adrian Peterson had 75 yards on 20 carries. Not the best stats in the world, but he did have 2 touchdowns and really ran the ball tough and effective. He's always also a great asset in play-action pass, where we've seen Christian Ponder throw a couple touchdowns before going down to an injury. I don't see the Redskins, like last year, they were 3-6, ripping off 7 straight wins to win the division. Now, ironically enough, they are only 1 game back in the loss column of being off the division lead, as both the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys are 5-5, but too inconsistent this year for the Redskins, and I don't see them faring particularly well. As we move on to our next game, the Seattle Seahawks beat the Atlanta Falcons 33-10. In this game, we've seen the Falcons continue to struggle. They are unable to run the ball, which really makes them one-dimensional. And with quarterback Matt Ryan only having one viable aspect in the passing game, being Tony Gonzalez, really difficult to move the ball, especially against a tough defense like Seattle. The offensive line continues to struggle, and on the defensive side, just too much pressure and being on the field too long. The loss dropped the Falcons to 2-7, and I think that loss pretty much can throw their playoff hopes away. On the other side of the ball, the Seattle Seahawks are really rounding into form, finding their balance. Through the air, Russell Wilson passed for 287 yards and 2 TDs, looked very sharp. Marshawn Lynch ran for 145 yards and a touchdown. And Golden Tate has really established himself as the primary weapon in the passing game, with his second straight game with over 100 yards receiving, and one of the prettiest touchdown catches of the year. May end up being the catch of the year with a great one-handed left-hand grab in the back of the end zone. Seattle's really tough on defense. They didn't get a whole lot of turnovers and takeaways, but really made life difficult on the Falcons, especially converting third downs. The only downfall for Seattle is they did lose cornerback Browner for an extensive period of time. It's a growing injury, but with them being 9-1, I'm quite sure they'll nurse the injury and make sure he's good and ready to go for the playoffs. On the flip side for Seattle, they are expecting Percy Harvin to make his debut this upcoming week against Minnesota, so that should bolster the offense a little. And on the defensive side, Seattle has enough playmakers where I think the Brandon Browner injury they can cover over for. In our next game, we've seen the Detroit Lions beat the Chicago Bears 21-13. This was a very evenly matched and closely played game. The key point in this game came when Chicago threw an interception on the 4-yard line. This is the second time this year I've seen Jay Cutler make a costly turnover inside the 5-yard line, trying to pass the ball into tons of defenders. It was a quick slant he was going off of play action, threw it into a ton of traffic, and the ball got tipped in the air and intercepted. With them only losing by 2 points, on that score was 21-19. You figure a play like that is a difference in the game, because they could have easily came out of that with a field goal, or maybe tried running the ball for a touchdown instead. Detroit was able to capitalize. Calvin Johnson had 2 TD receptions through the air, and Reggie Bush continues to be an X-factor as he ran for over 100 yards on the ground. That win put Detroit at 6-3 on the season, a game ahead of Chicago, and Detroit for first place in the division at 5-4. For the Bears, it was just difficult for them on the ground. Matt Forte did have 17 carries, but only 33 yards. And then through the air, Brandon Marshall had a great game, 139 yards and 2 TDs, but the Bears really struggled to move the ball at important times during the game, and also came out of this game with a couple more injuries. Quarterback Jay Cutler, who came into the game nursing or fresh off of a groin injury, re-aggravated it slightly and also suffered a high ankle sprain. He's unlikely to go next week versus Baltimore. They also lost all-pro cornerback Charles Tillman to a tricep injury for the year. So the Bears injuries just continue to mount up as they already have lost, key players like Lance Briggs and Henry Melton on the defensive side of the football. Next, we've seen the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Green Bay Packers 27-13. Nick Foles continues to be red hot, passing for 228 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Deshaun Jackson had a big play with over 50-yard receiving touchdown. And his main target, speaking of Foles, continues to be Riley Cooper. 2 more touchdown receptions, which brings his total to 6 over the last 2 weeks. That combination is red hot right now. They got the balance they needed. LaShawn McCoy ran for 155 yards on the ground, and the Eagles defense really did a great job at limiting Green Bay running game with Eddie Lacy. And also, Green Bay came into this game without starter Aaron Rodgers. They had Seneca Wallace, who isn't the best backup in the world when it comes to passing the football. He went down to an injury, so we had our third-string quarterback come in, and by that time it was a little too late. The Eagles improved to 5-5. They're now in the first-place tie with the Cowboys, who hold a half-game lead with the head-to-head victory. The Packers dropped to 5-4, and they have some big-time adjustments they're going to have to make until Rodgers gets back, because it looks like teams are going to stack the box on Eddie Lacy and force the quarterback to throw the ball while applying immense pressure. Next in line, we've seen the Jacksonville Jaguars get their first victory of the season. The win improved them to 1-8. They beat the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee, which dropped them to 4-5. The Jaguars got a huge boost as Tennessee started off the game by fumbling the opening kickoff return, which allowed Maurice Jones-Drew to pound it inside the red zone on 4 straight runs. And there pretty much was no looking back from there. Tennessee was never able to get any type of momentum, especially on the ground. Chris Johnson was held in check. They also end up losing starting quarterback Jake Locker again, this time to a season-ending foot injury. Backup Ryan Fitzpatrick did come in and do a good job. I actually think Fitzpatrick is a little bit better than Jake Locker at this point in his career. But overall, Jacksonville did the necessary things they needed to do to get their first win, including a huge play towards the end of the game when the defensive back blitz stripped Ryan Fitzpatrick and took the ball in for a touchdown to seal that game. Next in line, we've seen our stunner of the day. The St. Louis Rams went into Indianapolis and destroyed the Colts 38-8. Similar to the game in Tennessee, got off to a bad start immediately on the very first offensive play for the Indianapolis Colts. Quarterback Andrew Luck was sacked, stripped by Robert Quinn. Chris Long, the other defensive end, picked the ball up and ran it in for a touchdown, and it became a very long day for Andrew Luck and company. Rookie Tavon Austin for the Rams had the breakout game we had all been expecting and waiting for, running a punt back 98 yards for a touchdown, also scoring on 2 long pass plays of over 50 yards. Really had an opportunity to see the damage he can do in the open field. Very explosive, dynamic player who, when he gets the ball in his hands in space, very difficult to get a hand on this guy. So I'm really happy to see him break out, and hopefully the Rams can find different ways to get the ball in his hands, because we've seen the damage he can do. Rookie Zach Stacy continues to be steady on the ground with 62 tough running yards on 21 carries, but provided the balance. And Kellen Clemens seems to be doing a good job limiting turnovers. I pretty much thought when Sam Bradford went down, St. Louis season was over, but Clemens is holding the ship. For Indianapolis, we're now looking at some big-time problems on the offensive line in pass protecting Andrew Luck. The running game is still sputtering with Trent Richardson not doing much at all. And Reggie Wayne being gone is huge, because they don't have that possession, acute route running, reliable hands type receiver. T.Y. Hilton did rack up 130 yards through the air, but they were pretty much meaningless, as Indianapolis was pretty much forced to pass the ball a lot by being down so much early. At one point it was 35-0. And this is the second straight week that they struggled in the first half. Last week they were being pounded at Houston 21-3 before Houston coach Gary